My name is Vincent, and one simple comment from my wife changed everything I thought I knew about our marriage. Diane and I had been together for 18 years, almost 2 decades of shared routines, private jokes, and a life I believed was built on trust. I honestly thought we saw the world the same way and valued the same things. But one quiet Sunday morning, while we were driving to brunch with no music and barely any traffic, Diane talked about her closest friend. What she said seemed small at first, just a casual comment, but it made something click in my mind. In that moment, I realized I had trusted her too much, and that one conversation made every hidden sign fall into place. We met the woman who would become my wife in Indianapolis when I was 29 and she was 27. I was finishing my emergency medicine residency at IU Health Methodist Hospital. Long shifts, 80-hour weeks, and a life ruled by exhaustion. Diane worked regular business hours as a marketing coordinator for a financial services firm. Her world was steady and predictable. Mine was anything but. We met through mutual college friends at a small weekend gathering. Despite our different lifestyles, the connection was immediate. She liked hearing about my medical training and seemed impressed by the dedication it required. I was drawn to her calmness and the sense of everyday life she carried with her, something I didn't have at the hospital. We began dating seriously, even though my schedule was a mess. She handled the canceled plans, the late nights, and the constant interruptions with more patience than I deserved. She brought me dinner on busy shifts and listened when I needed to unload after complex cases. She genuinely supported what I was becoming, even when it meant her needs often came second. After 2.5 years, we got married. We took a short weekend honeymoon and began our married life properly. Our son, Brandon, was born when I was 32, just a year into my first attending position. Diane left her marketing job to stay home with Brandon. The decision made financial sense. Childcare costs would have eaten most of her paycheck. Made practical sense given my unpredictable schedule. Someone needed to be consistently available for our son. I took on additional shifts to compensate for becoming the sole income provider. The pattern of our marriage was set early, during the years when Brandon was young. I worked constantly, 12-hour ER shifts, days, nights, holidays, weekends, whatever the hospital needed. Diane handled everything at home. She raised our son, kept the house running, and managed the parts of life I was too exhausted to touch. I truly believed that hard work and providing well would protect our marriage. As my income grew, I gave them a better home, good schools, family trips, and financial stability. In my mind, that was what a good husband and father did. I stayed faithful, without struggle. Hospitals are full of attractive people working in high-stress situations, but the thought never crossed my mind. My vows felt absolute. I trusted myself completely. Emotionally, I thought I was reliable too. When I wasn't at the hospital, I tried to be present, to play with Brandon, to focus on Diane, to make our limited time count. I assumed that effort was enough. Betrayal never even seemed possible. We had normal arguments about money, schedules, parenting, but nothing that hinted at deeper problems. Nothing suggested Diane was capable of hurting me. Emergency medicine attracts people who can compartmentalize. You learn to handle trauma, make fast decisions, then switch everything off and go home. That skill keeps you sane at work, but it blinds you to slow changes at home. Problems grow quietly while you're busy dealing with everyone else's emergencies. I'd watched many colleagues' marriages fall apart. Emergency physicians have divorce rates close to 60%. The hours, the emotional fatigue, the constant absence, it wears people down. I listened to stories about spouses who felt abandoned and eventually left or cheated. I felt bad for them, but a part of me felt lucky. Diane had stayed with me through residency and nearly 20 years of ER life. I believed we were solid. Looking back, that confidence was naive, maybe even arrogant. There were signs, I just wasn't paying attention. By the time our son Brandon left for college at 18, I believe we had made it through the hardest years of marriage and parenting. We had raised an intelligent, responsible young man who was learning to stand on his own. We had built strong financial security. We had survived almost 20 years of demanding work schedules. And now, With the house finally quiet, I thought Diane and I were stepping into a new stage of life with a solid foundation and a future full of possibilities we never had when Brandon was still living under our roof. At first, Brandon's departure seemed to bring new energy into our marriage. Diane and I suddenly had more time for each other. We could actually sit down and talk, not as co-parents juggling responsibilities, but as a couple again. We started planning regular date nights, something we had lost during Brandon's high school years when his activities and my long shifts kept us running in different directions. We tried new restaurants we had always talked about. We went to concerts and small theater shows. Sometimes we booked weekend trips to nearby cities to get away and breathe a little. All of this meant we were rebuilding our bond. I believed we were finding our way back to the closeness we had before life became a blur of raising a child and chasing careers. I felt hopeful, more hopeful than I had in years. It never crossed my mind that Diane might be using that same freedom for something else entirely. The change in my life began on a Sunday morning that should have been completely ordinary. It was one of my rare full days off. No shifts, no emergency calls, no hospital responsibilities hanging over my head. Just a calm day with my wife, Diane. We were driving to a brunch spot we both liked, about 20 minutes from home. The drive started peacefully. We talked about small, everyday things, our plans for the coming week, whether we should finally replace the old living room furniture, and what errands we needed to run. Then Diane casually shifted the topic to her best friend, Kristen. They'd known each other since our son, Brandon, was in elementary school. They met through parent-teacher meetings and school events, and had stayed close for more than 10 years. I knew Kristen well enough. We'd had dinners with her and her husband many times. They seemed like decent, ordinary people. We weren't close, but we were friendly. So when Diane started telling me about Kristen's latest drama, I expected something silly. But then Diane said Kristen had gotten involved with a much younger man, someone she met at yoga class or a local event. The details were fuzzy, but the point was clear. Kristen was cheating. Naturally, I thought Diane would be upset or at least uneasy about it. Kristen was married. She had a family. This was an affair, no way around it. I expected Diane to say she was worried for her friend or disappointed or confused about what to do. But instead, Diane talked about it with a strange, light tone, almost amused. The way she spoke made it sound exciting, almost fun, as if she were telling me gossip from a TV show rather than talking about someone destroying their marriage. What bothered me even more was how many details she seemed to know. She knew the guy was 25, just a little older than our own son. She knew the affair had been going on for months. She talked with the kind of confidence that only comes from long, detailed conversations, not the occasional quick update. The more I listened to her, the more unease grows inside me. A deep, uncomfortable feeling that I couldn't explain. Why was she talking about adultery like it was harmless fun? I tried to shake it off, but the feeling stayed. Something about the whole conversation felt wrong, even if I couldn't put it into words. We reached the restaurant, ate brunch, and continued with the rest of our day as if nothing had happened. But my mind kept returning to Diane's detail of her friend's affair and her complete lack of concern for the husband who was being betrayed. I couldn't forget it. I couldn't shake it. Over the next few days, the conversation would not leave me. At first, it was a small voice at the back of my head. Then it grew louder. I began noticing things I had ignored before. That awareness slid into worry, then into something worse, dread. My curiosity turned into an urge I could not push down. A few days later, Diane left her phone on the bed while she stepped outside. I found myself at the edge of a choice I hated making. I tried the 6-digit passcode she had used for years. The screen stayed dark. The code no longer worked. She had changed it. That small act felt deliberate and alarming. People do not lock their phones suddenly unless they are protecting something. I remembered Diane's MacBook Air. She barely used it, so I had assumed she had not changed that password. When I opened the laptop that afternoon, it powered on with the old code. Her iCloud was still signed in, and Messages was set to sync with the computer. Every text on her phone would appear there. Sitting at her desk in our study, I found the message thread from months back with Kristen and read it. What I read destroyed me. The messages showed that both Diane and Kristen were having affairs with much younger men. They compared notes and laughed about their secret meetings. Their talk was full of excitement and details that were plainly sexual. They shared photos, planned meeting times and places, and even advised each other on how to avoid being caught. They treated marriage like an obstacle to be gotten around rather than something to be kept. One name kept appearing in Diane's messages: Cole. From the chat, I learned he was 24, only 6 years older than our son Brandon. Their messages stretched back about 8 months, roughly when Brandon had left for college. I found the thread between Diane and Cole. It ran for hundreds of messages. There were shirtless pictures, flirty texts, and messages from Diane calling him desirable, saying she couldn't stop thinking about him, and asking him to come over. Reading it made one thing clear. Cole had been here, in our house, in our bedroom, in my bed, while I was at the hospital. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I watched the life I had built collapse before me. For many years, I had worked myself into exhaustion. I missed holidays, school events, and family dinners because I believed I was providing something important. I made sure Diane and Brandon never lacked for anything money could buy. I had been faithful. And while I was saving lives and keeping steady in emergencies, a man young enough to be my son had been sleeping with my wife in my house. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and fell to the floor. The sobs I let out were the kind I had not felt since my father died. I was crushed, humiliated, and furious all at once. But the part of my mind that knows how to act under pressure took over. The same training that keeps me steady in an emergency told me not to explode. Confronting Diane in a rage would ruin any chance I had of making safe, clear choices. I needed facts, not fury. So I decided then that if this ended in divorce, it would be done with strategy, not anger. For the next several days, I moved through life in a strange, almost disconnected state. I would come home from work and talk to Diane as if nothing was wrong, even though I knew she was still cheating on me. The mental conflict was crushing, but I knew I had to act normal for the plan to work. Within a week, I called a divorce attorney. A colleague who had gone through a very rough divorce a few years earlier recommended him. I scheduled the consultation, met the attorney in his downtown Indianapolis office, and told him everything. He explained Indiana's divorce laws in detail. Indiana is a no-fault state, meaning I didn't need to prove adultery to file. But he said evidence of cheating could still affect several important things. How marital property would be divided if Diane had spent marital money on the affair, whether spousal support might be considered, and my overall leverage during settlement negotiations. The divorce attorney warned me that screenshots alone weren't strong evidence, unless they were verified correctly. He said I needed complete, well-organized documentation. He also stressed that I must not alert Diane too soon, because she could delete messages or destroy evidence. His advice was clear: act completely normal at home. Don't change spending habits or do anything that looks suspicious. Build a detailed timeline showing the affair was ongoing, not a one-time mistake. Over the next several weeks, I followed his instructions exactly. Whenever I had the chance, I accessed Diane's MacBook. I collected screenshots of messages, saved details of planned meetings, and archived photos Diane and Cole had exchanged. I stored everything on an encrypted external drive, which I kept locked in my office locker at the hospital. The attorney also strongly advised me to hire a licensed private investigator. He gave me the contact information for someone he had successfully worked with on multiple divorce cases, someone who knew how to collect evidence courts would actually accept. I met the investigator at a plain, quiet coffee shop. I explained what I needed, and he agreed to take the case. His job was to gather physical evidence that could stand in court. During the next 2 months, he worked steadily. He watched our house while I was on my hospital shifts. He took photos of anyone who came in or out. He followed Diane when she left the house. He documented her meetings with Cole at hotels and different Airbnb rentals around Indianapolis. Little by little, he put together a thick file showing everything: the frequency of their meetings, the times, the locations, and the precise pattern proving this was an ongoing relationship, not a single accident. Every photo and report was collected in accordance with strict legal guidelines. During these months, pretending everything was normal at home was the hardest part. I would come home and make casual conversation with Diane as if nothing were happening. I would lie in bed beside her at night, pretending I didn't know she had spent the afternoon with another man. I acted like our marriage was fine while secretly gathering evidence to end it. The emotional toll was crushing. I felt like I was betraying myself by staying quiet. I felt weak for not kicking her out immediately. But deep down, I understood that confronting her too soon would ruin the legal case, affect the financial outcome, and possibly put me at an even bigger disadvantage. After almost 3 months of careful work, the private investigator and I finally had more evidence than I ever expected. There were dozens of photos, hotel receipts, and a long timeline that stretched back months. We had proof that marital money was being used for the affair. Credit card charges from our joint account paying for hotels, restaurant dates, gifts for Cole, even Uber rides to their meeting spots. And all of it was funded by my income. At that point, I made a decision that some people might call petty or cruel, but to me it felt necessary. Before filing for divorce, I wanted Diane to face the reality of what she had done. So I chose to expose parts of the affair publicly, anonymously. I didn't release everything. I didn't reveal enough to make anyone guess it came from me, but I released just enough to shake her world, to disrupt the comfortable social life she had enjoyed while cheating on me behind closed doors. I posted selected photos anonymously on local community message boards. I uploaded them to the neighborhood Facebook groups and even to the church page Diane attended from time to time. I shared them on online forums where her social circle often discussed them. I made it look like a concerned stranger had discovered the affair and was exposing it out of moral outrage, not as part of my plan for divorce. Within a few days, the photos spread through her social groups like wildfire. Diane quickly became anxious and visibly ashamed, though she had no idea I was the one behind everything. She would come home looking nervous and shaky. She checked her phone constantly. She avoided events she would normally enjoy. She seemed terrified, as if the ground beneath her feet had suddenly become unstable, and she didn't know how to stop it from getting worse. One evening, I returned home after a long shift at the hospital. This was during the peak of the gossip spreading. I found Diane sitting at the kitchen table, looking completely defeated. Her hands were trembling. She couldn't meet my eyes. She tried to act normal, but her fear was written all over her face. She was terrified that I had seen the photos, but she didn't know for sure. She didn't want to say anything that would reveal her guilt if I hadn't heard about them yet. She watched me closely, trying to guess what I knew. I didn't mention the photos at all. I acted completely normal, asked about her day in a calm, casual voice. The silence, the normal tone, the way I pretended everything was fine, it affected her more than any angry confrontation ever could. Watching her crumble under the weight of her own guilt and confusion, while I acted like nothing was wrong, was more powerful than shouting or accusing her. And she had no idea I was the one who started the storm. About a week after the photos leaked online, I arranged for a process server to deliver the divorce papers. I planned it carefully, so it would happen while I was at the hospital, just to avoid any immediate confrontation. I didn't want to see her face or hear her excuses. Not yet. Within an hour of being served, Diane called me at work. The moment I answered, I heard her crying. She was begging for me to come home, so that we can talk before I make a permanent mistake. She kept saying I was about to throw away 18 years of marriage over something insignificant. I listened without interrupting, but inside I felt nothing. When she was done, I told her we would communicate only through our attorneys, that I had nothing to discuss with her directly, and that the marriage was over. Over the next several weeks, she tried every approach she could think of. Sometimes she apologized over and over for making a terrible mistake. Other times, she tried to explain that she had felt lonely, that my work schedule left her feeling ignored. She said she still loved me. She said Cole meant nothing, that it was just physical, that we could try counseling, therapy, anything. I refused every attempt. She insisted we owed it to Brandon, and to ourselves, to try at least to fix things. Every conversation ended with the same calm reply: "The attorneys will handle everything. Reconciliation is not possible." There was nothing to save. The divorce proceedings lasted about 9 months from start to finish. Indiana law required full financial disclosure, so every asset, every account, and every expense had to be laid bare. There were lengthy, tense negotiations over how property should be divided and whether Diane was entitled to spousal support. Diane had hired a high-powered attorney, someone with a reputation for being aggressive and relentless. Her lawyer argued that after an 18-year marriage, Diane was entitled to substantial alimony. She claimed Diane had given up her own career ambitions to raise their son, Brandon, and manage the household. She had supported my career by handling everything at home, and a sudden divorce would leave her financially devastated after years of relying on my income. My attorney, however, countered with detailed evidence showing that Diane had misused marital assets. We presented the investigators' surveillance reports and supporting financial documents. Credit card statements showed that our joint accounts had been used to pay for expenses related to her affair. We also argued that the affair itself was relevant to determining spousal support, demonstrating that Diane's choices made her less deserving of ongoing financial assistance. The judge, a middle-aged woman with years of experience handling complex divorces, carefully reviewed every piece of evidence. She reviewed surveillance photographs, examined detailed reports, verified that the electronic messages I had authenticated were correct, and analyzed the financial records showing Diane's spending patterns. When the ruling came, it was decisive. Diane was awarded only 12 months of transitional spousal support, enough to help her get back on her feet, but far short of the long-term alimony she had expected. The property division was roughly equal, but structured to minimize any future financial obligations on my part. Additionally, the judge penalized Diane for dissipating marital assets, requiring her to account for money spent on the affair and reducing her property settlement accordingly. Diane had entered the divorce expecting to walk away with half of everything plus ongoing support, the usual outcome in long-term marriages. Instead, the evidence of her affair and financial misconduct cost her significantly. What she had assumed would be her financial security turned out to be far less than anticipated. Brandon learned the truth during the divorce proceedings. At first, Diane tried to spin the situation, painting me as unreasonable, even cruel. She told Brandon that I was ending the marriage over minor, exaggerated concerns, that I was destroying our family over nothing real. I didn't let her story go unchallenged. I showed Brandon carefully selected evidence, not everything, because I didn't want to overwhelm him with explicit or graphic details, but enough to make the reality clear. It wasn't a baseless accusation, and it wasn't an overreaction. His mother had systematically betrayed our family in ways that cut deeply. And the man she had been involved with? Only 6 years older than Brandon himself. The revelation hit Brandon like a thunderclap. He was devastated, furious, and felt personally betrayed. The closeness in age to Cole made it even harder to process. He had grown up trusting both of his parents, believing in their integrity, and learning that his mother had pursued a relationship with someone nearly his own age. At the same time, his father worked tirelessly to provide for the family. That trust was shattered entirely. Brandon reacted decisively. He almost completely distanced himself from Diane. Their contact became minimal, brief, obligatory phone calls on holidays, and he refused to visit her or spend any real time with her. Diane, meanwhile, faced consequences that went far beyond the divorce itself. The leaked photographs spread through her social networks, leaving her socially humiliated. Friends she was once close to kept their distance or cut ties entirely. Even her church community turned judgmental, whispering behind her back until the shame became unbearable, forcing her to stop attending. Financial pressures mounted, too. Her reduced settlement meant she needed to find a job after 18 years out of the workforce. Worst of all, she lost Brandon's respect and affection, and the comfortable life she had taken for granted slipped through her fingers. everything she had risked for excitement with a younger man, for the thrill of feeling desirable and alive, had cost her nearly everything that had truly mattered. Looking back now, I understand patterns more clearly. I learned that casual conversations often reveal more than people realize. Diane's comfortable, almost enthusiastic way of talking about Kristen's affair had been the first real clue. I saw then that people who betray can't entirely hide the satisfaction or ease they feel when doing something wrong. Their tone, their energy, even their casual laughter can say more than words themselves. I learned that working hard and providing well doesn't guarantee faithfulness or gratitude. I had always assumed that financial security, a comfortable home, and a life without worry would keep Diane happy and loyal. But instead, she used that comfort and the long hours my work demanded to pursue excitement elsewhere. My dedication, my absence, had created the very opportunity she chose to exploit. I learned that electronic evidence is robust, but only if it's appropriately documented. Finding her messages on the MacBook mattered, but by itself, it wouldn't have been enough in a legal setting. Hiring a private investigator to conduct professional surveillance created evidence that could actually stand in court, and that evidence ultimately shaped the outcome of the divorce. I learned that patience, even in the face of betrayal, is stronger than immediate emotional reaction. Every instinct screamed for me to confront Diane the moment I saw the messages. But holding back, carefully documenting everything, and building a complete case before taking legal action protected me in ways a heated confrontation never could. Most importantly, I learned that some betrayals leave no room for reconciliation. People urged me to forgive, to consider counseling, to remember the years we had shared, to think about Brandon and the family. But the calculated nature of Diane's deception, an affair lasting 8 months, conducted in our home, with someone of Brandon's age, destroyed any foundation we might have rebuilt. Some people called me vindictive. They said leaking photographs was cruel, unnecessary, and that I should have handled everything privately. But they didn't understand the depth of betrayal. They couldn't comprehend what it felt like to discover your wife had been sleeping with someone your son's age in your bed, while you were treating trauma patients and trusting completely. They didn't understand the humiliation of being loyal while being blind to the truth. I'm not proud of that choice, but I don't regret it. Diane earned those consequences through her own decisions. Others said I was generous in the divorce settlement, that I could have demanded more, punished her harder, or limited her contact with Brandon. But I wasn't interested in endless conflict. I wanted freedom, a clean break, and a way to move forward without ongoing entanglement. The settlement achieved those goals efficiently. I am in a very different place now than I was during my marriage. I still think about Diane sometimes, wonder if she regrets what she did, if she's found any happiness, or if she's still managing the consequences of her choices. I wonder if Cole is still in her life, or if their relationship collapsed once the secrecy and excitement faded.